Hi guys, welcome to Pancreas Pals. Emily here.
And Miriam.
And this week's incredibly special guest is parenting editor Bethany Braun-Silva, who is also a type 1 diabetic. Welcome, Bethany.
Thank you, Emily and Miriam. I'm so excited to be here and really get into this with you guys.
I am, for lack of a better word, pumped. Pun intended. It's been a minute since I said that pun, so honestly kind of proud of myself. But welcome, Bethany. We are so excited to discuss all things parenting as a type 1 with you. I think that this is such an important episode that I feel like this podcast has kind of grown up with Miriam and I in a sense of the things we used to talk about versus the things we're talking about now. Mom, if you're listening, I am not having a child anytime soon, so don't get your hopes up. To my boyfriend's parents who are listening, definitely not having a child anytime soon. Love you. Don't ever change. But we are growing up and, pregnancy, parenting with type 1, these are all things that are top of mind these days. And whether or not you're a teenager listening to this or you have 10 kids of your own, power to you if you do, it's all applicable. Family planning, type 1 diabetes. You might not think of it when you first get diagnosed, but hey, it's something to think about eventually. So welcome, Bethany.
Thank you.
Let's just dive into your diagnosis story.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed in 2017. Oh my gosh, no, I was 17 in 2002. Wait a minute.
I love that. That was amazing.
Wait, that was a total just me brain fart. Okay, I was diagnosed in 2002. I was 17 years old. I was a senior in high school. I had all the typical symptoms. I was losing weight by the pounds by the day, frequent urination, excessive thirst, all those things, and just feeling leg cramps. So actually my mom is in healthcare, even though she's a pediatric audiologist, but she kind of recognized the symptoms within a month and sent me to my pediatrician at the time. I was sort of like on the cusp, 17, and they just completely disregarded everything that I was telling. I said, I went in there and said, my mom wants you to test my blood sugars for diabetes. And I guess I was 17. She wasn't with me. They were just kind of like, nah. And I mean, look, we're here to be open and honest. I had thrush in my mouth. I had which is essentially like a yeast infection, right? In your mouth, or yeast growing, not an infection, but yeast growing in your mouth. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know if
it sounds grosser than it actually is. Yeah. I mean, that's like fairly common though, just to say. It sounds, I don't want anyone listening being like, oh my God, ew, and then hitting Bethany up. Like, this is something that happens. It has to do with pH imbalance. I'm not a doctor, but I think that's what it has to do with. It can happen on your lips.
Exactly.
It can happen
and
anywhere.
I haven't had it since. I mean, I had it undiagnosed with raging blood sugars, but I haven't had it since. I haven't had it in the last, 20 years. So I went in, they disregarded me. I went another month. And as we know, with these symptoms, they just get progressively worse and worse.
Yeah.
The day I went in a second time, about a month later, my mom still wasn't with me, but she was kind of like, call me if they don't test you. I insisted they tested me. My blood sugar was 525, and I was,
oh my God,
my parents were called. Yeah, they called my parents, and they came down. And it's funny because that day is very clear in my head, and we're going to get into my whole parenting experience, but I have still never forgotten like the reaction of seeing them walk into that office, knowing that like life as we know it was going to change, forever with this disease.
Right.
So it was rough going for a little while. I mean, it's always rough, I think, a diabetes diagnosis, but I was 17 applying to colleges. It ended up changing my whole like trajectory. I stayed home. I mean, I went to NYU. I mean, oh my God, poor me. But like that's because I'm from New York City. I ended up staying home, not like going away anywhere, And so it was just like all those kind of like power struggles and wanting to feel independent, but also being a newly diagnosed diabetic and needing my parents more than ever. So that was, 2022 will be 20 years of diabetes for me. Yeah, that's pretty much the diagnosis.
You're so close. Yeah. That's like, it's similar to both Miriam and mine in that I'm gonna speak for Miriam while she just listens to me tell her story. Yeah.
No, but I think you're kind of right in between us.
Who's
Yeah, my dad was
Yeah.
also a physician.
Sorry,
and
guys.
kind of
Anyone
was
who's
able.
listening right now and is like, why Sorry, there's a lag going on. I will fix this in editing. But Miriam, I'm not trying to talk over you. I'm sorry. Please continue.
I know. But no, similarly, my dad was also, my dad was a physician, identified the symptoms almost immediately. Luckily, I was 6 at the time, so they tested me right away. It was a much more quick turnaround. But in the sense of developmentally where you were at your diagnosis, I was a kid. Emily was already away at college when she was diagnosed. And so for me, it was like, well, no brainer. I'm 6 years old. Of course my parents are going to take care of me, and this is their thing that they have to really manage. Whereas Emily was like just past you, where she was already out in college, independent. And so you're right that 17 years old is like
I knew no one.
There. Yeah, like where you're hinging between kid and like sort of adults. And so, yeah, I imagine that was very impactful in how you grew to learn about this new life that you were forced into.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, it's just, you're just at the cusp of like really trying to like have some autonomy, and then just kind of getting and all like the little things you might think aren't big deals. Like maybe now looking back, it was like whatever, but missing out on like parties and going out and just feeling you're still kind of getting used to this like body with like hormones, and now it's like this whole new body that you have to like inject with medicine and all of that, and
Right.
and weekends are spent like carb counting rather than hanging out, and it was just obviously
Partying.
I mean yeah, your audience knows, and I'm not saying anything kind of like groundbreakingly new here, but yeah, that was, and looking back, it took me sort of a while to kind of reflect on that and look back and just see kind of how impactful it was on my mental health during that time. It's not something,
Right.
it's something I kind of haven't like revisited until like the last few years.
I know, at least from on my end, when I was diagnosed in the middle / when I finally got my proper diagnosis, head back to season 1 episode 1 to hear all about my diagnosis, and season 1 episode 2 for Miriam's. But I really, looking back, like I did not let any of that stop me, and I am honestly I cringe sometimes. Like I'm proud of myself, but I didn't have a CGM for like the first however many months. I was lucky. I only went months, but I was drinking. I was doing things that
It's almost
now
like
wildly affect my blood sugar.
Bliss.
And that is, yeah, but I was like, fine. I mean, I'm sure for many people, that's not always the case. And I've always been painfully responsible. And now with diabetes, I feel like I missed on my rebellious phase. I tell my parents that all the time. But it's wild. And you were going off to college. I can't imagine how that, like, had I gotten that diagnosis, I might not have ever gone to Boston University, like 1,100 miles away from my family or anyone I knew. I would have never met Christy, who I started the podcast with. I would have never, known anyone else functioning with diabetes. So I think that it's powerful. Any age that you're diagnosed is powerful, but it sets your trajectory for the rest of your life with type 1. Because Miriam, you grew up getting to go to camps and getting to go meet other people with type 1, but we were older. Like I wasn't about to roll up to summer camp as a 20-year-old. A, that's creepy, and B, I don't think it's a thing. I know there are summer camps, but like they're like adult summer camps, and they cost a pretty penny, and also like it's not the same. No. So Bethany, like that kind of leads me to your experience. I know we briefly talked about this before we started the episode, but did you know anyone with type 1? What was your experience being diagnosed so close to going to college and then having to figure it all out?
Yeah, I didn't know anyone. And to be honest, aside from you girls, I don't really know anyone. And being diagnosed at 17 as a senior in high school, I think a lot of like compartmentalization like happened. And I guess what I mean by that is like my diabetes was a specific part of my life that wasn't really shared with anyone. So when I did go to college, it wasn't like, hey, I'm a diabetic. You know what I mean? I was like, I never shared it. I don't want to say that I was like ashamed of it. I just wanted it to be a non-issue. I didn't want to be treated differently. I
Right.
didn't want, but then of course there are, like health concerns, if you go low and people need to know. So I was very quiet about my, diabetes and try to have, I'm doing quotes here, as normal of a sort of college experience as possible. I didn't like talking about it. I didn't want people to tell me, oh, you can't eat that, this and that. So I really sort of just push. I don't know if I
That still
pushing
gets
it
my goat.
down. Yeah, oh yeah. Like if I just
Don't
didn't
get me
talk
started
about
on that.
it. Yeah, it wasn't like
Yeah.
it's not how I really identified, myself up until recently. I mean, I think it took me a long time to really just understand it's just part of my identity, and and anyone else can just, whatever anyone thinks about it or questions. I think I just mostly just didn't want to field questions. Because I was able to manage it well. And I think that was part of it too, because I was able to just manage it without a lot of thought. The carb counting came easy. I was on a pump after a year. I didn't use a CGM for a while because it was this weird one that is not like it is now, where you kind of like you got readings like after the fact. It wasn't like a
Yes.
sort of instantaneous thing.
Yeah.
I can't
And
even
those
remember what
early
it's
stage
called.
ones weren't very, accurate either. It was
User
cumbersome.
friendly. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was just something I managed quietly and, was able to have, good numbers. It was just not, I had no sort of side effects. I mean, as you might not that early on, but it wasn't until recently that I started to like, kind of be, more open about it, and identify and like try to find other people and connect with them.
Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think that finding that community, sorry guys, I'm like on such a delay over here. I think that Miriam and I always talk about the importance of finding a community, but it has to be something that works for you. I mean, when you're in that fight or flight mode, or when you're starting out a new chapter in your life, it's not always about diabetes, and it doesn't need to be, and it honestly shouldn't be. But one aspect that it should be somewhat about diabetes is parenthood with type 1, which is, I don't know how seamless that transition was, but it's where I'm headed. So, skipping over the whole pregnancy aspect, because that could be an entire episode in and of itself. I love the idea of you telling us how you discuss type 1 and educate your children about, hey, mom has something different going on here. This is mom's insulin pump. Please don't press a button. Like how those things work.
Yeah, and I will say, and I won't get too heavily into the pregnancy but I will say that was the first time that diabetes sort of like was all like slap me in the face, if I can just say that, because, and I don't really mean that in a negative way. It's just like things are very predictable if you're well managed and, have a good team of doctors up until that point, or at least it was for me. So that's sort of, I get, and then that's kind of like a nice analogy for parenting. Like you kind of like don't know what's going to happen on any given day. And I kind of felt like that managing my blood sugars during my pregnancy. But then, so my kids are 9 and 5. They're in third grade and kindergarten. And my older son really started to notice what was happening as far as like finger sticks and stuff like that. Cause I'm on the Dexcom and the Omnipod now, but when he was younger, I was doing Novolog injections and Lantus and taking finger sticks. So he was seeing me do that, and of course he sees that he was noticing that it was a needle, there was blood, and I think his first reaction was kind of just like he was scared.
Right.
I think my, if I'm remembering this right, we were in the kitchen. I had kind of my supplies laid out on the counter. I took my blood sugar, and this isn't something that I was really. I'm home, so it wasn't like the first time he saw me doing it, but I think it was the first time he really like registered that like this is not, daddy doesn't do this, grandma doesn't do this, like, so so he saw me doing it, and he had, he got a little scared. So, and he was young, and I tried to explain it to him in ways that were really digestible for, a 5-year-old, that this is something mommy needs to do for her health, and this is absolutely something you do not have to worry about. My 9-year-old does get kind of like anxious and things like that. So I knew almost immediately upon him seeing me do this that this was going to be an ongoing conversation that I was going to want to stay on top of.
And
he's 9 years old now.
How old was he around that time? That
he was about 5 or 6.
Okay.
Then, yeah.
So
and
it's interesting because like up till that point, it's almost like it's just so normal. He doesn't know any different. Oh, mom pokes her finger sometimes, but something clicks at that age, I guess.
Absolutely. But I will say I have a 5-year-old now, his little brother, and he is a completely different beast. Like he just doesn't like, he's like, whatever. But, yeah. So my 9-year-old, even like now to this day, if my phone is in, the living room and I'm in the bedroom and there's an alert for a low blood sugar or a high blood sugar, he comes running in and he's like, mommy, you need to deal with this. Like, this is not good. So I'm really trying to figure out what, I don't have all the answers because it's something that I'm sort of dealing with on a daily basis. I obviously don't want my kid to be stressed out over his mother's health. So as often as I can, I reassure him that this is okay, like that I'm managing it. And I think the best way that I've been able to do that and sort of alleviate some of the stress that he's feeling is to be really open and transparent with him and let him see, the devices, this new Dash system. It's over here. That's why I'm looking. It looks like a cell phone. It looks like a fun cell phone. So I let him, see it's fine. And then and now that I'm on the Omnipod and the Dexcom, there's really no needles happening in the house that he can, see. So that's helped. And, but yes, I think really having to explain it in a serious way but also kind of making it a non-issue. And I think we do that for all things parenting. I mean, we want to drive the point home, but don't make it such a thing that it's sort of like ruling everybody's daily life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting.
Honestly, this sounds so similar. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Miriam.
we're getting stuck again with
this is just showing the delay.
But it's interesting because I obviously do not have children of my own, but I do have a lot of nieces and nephews. And the one comparison is when and I'm very close with my niece, and she was like the firstborn of my niece. And when she was about 3, she started noticing my insulin pump, and it looks like a game. I have the T Slim, so there's lots of buttons, and it's really colorful and bright. So she looks like a cell phone. She's like, what is that? What is that? And so and she saw my Dexcom site when we were in our bathing suits, things like that. So she would ask, what is that? And it was the first time, she might have been even like 3 at this point. And I said, I'm just, something inside of my body doesn't work right. So these are my robot parts. I have robot parts to help it work better. And it felt like the simplest way to explain it. And she kind of was like, all right, and moved on. But then after a while, she and my nephew, they would call me like, oh, robot Miriam, robot aunt. And after a while, it kind of like, it's so silly, but it like starts bothering me. It's like, but I'm not a robot. Like, I'm a person. And so I felt like I had to kind of like backtrack, like, okay, wait, that wasn't the best way to explain it. So now as they're older, I kind of come up with like new ways to talk about it. I say, you have a pancreas. Mine doesn't work, so I have to wear my pancreas on the outside and tell it what to do, but yours does it on its own. So I find myself sort of like coming up with new ways to describe it every time. And I'm wondering if you kind of feel like that too, if you say something to them sometimes and you're like, maybe that came out the weird way and I should kind of backtrack a little.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think even though my 9-year-old's very bright, I don't think he knows what a pancreas is. So for me to explain it in those terms, I just don't think he would understand. But, my husband has called me the bionic woman at times in front of them. And I'm like, you know what, like, let's not do that. Because I think when, and I'm very, sort of inundated in the parenting space. And we talk a lot about, people who look different, people who, are moved differently in the world. And I think the best way to do it is kind of just to reiterate what I said, is to just not try to explain it in a way that they can understand and that's simple and clear and without kind of comparing it to anything else, because kids, they ultimately want to know the truth. And I think that when we talk about, explaining, the facts and being open for questions, it kind of is a way that to show our kids that we respect them and we trust them to understand this information. There's no, this is not a secret I need to keep from my kids, that, and I think that when we sort of go into treat it like that, it becomes like almost like a stigma that we definitely want to avoid. But I do want to share one thing with you guys, because I've been talking about my older son a lot, and he really does comprehend everything, although I think he does have a little bit of anxiety around it. But I do have a 5-year-old who I mentioned is the complete polar opposite. So he understands that I have these devices that absolutely are important to me, that he's really not allowed to touch unless I'm in the room, and he has to ask me first. So I had this, and I'm, we're working on discipline and setting boundaries and all of this. And I think he made a huge mess. I think he does so many crazy things. Like he cut, like, I think he actually was doing an arts and craft project on my bed and cut through the mattress yeah. So he got in a lot of trouble for that. He went to timeout, and we sort of took some space. And about half an hour later, I go to bolus, or, before I eat a snack, and I can't find my pump anywhere. It is completely gone. And mind you, it's wrapped in it has a case, like a colorful case. And regardless, he knows what it is, and that he's not allowed to touch it. I could not find it anywhere. I start freaking out. I'm texting my husband. I'm asking my older son, where is this thing? Where is this thing? And I just see my 5-year-old is just not getting out of his room. So I was like, okay, I don't want to go in there and just guns blazing. But, I was like, Jake, have you seen Mommy's medicine? And he's just like, no, I haven't. No, I haven't.
Oh my God, this is terrifying.
Yeah, so I know he's a little diabolical. We're struggling with this one a little bit.
Rage bolus on you.
It was in the garbage. He had thrown it in. Now, if that had gone down the chute, what would I have done? But though now this sort of escalated, and I had to kind of remove myself from it, because I was just so furious at this point that I was like, okay, Dad's gonna deal with this, because I'm going to lose my shit.
I mean,
and I don't want that to happen. So that's was a huge lesson in self-control, but at the same time, it was like, how dare he?
I feel like there's two sides to this, and not in terms of right and wrong, but in terms of what he's comprehending. Because it's the scary aspect that he's, he is 5, that he does know enough that it's important enough that if he takes it, it will upset you. But also,
which developmentally makes sense at that age. But it
does. But then also, if I just, okay, first of all, that's hilarious, and second of all, he is going to be hilarious when he's older. But also, definitely put a little tile on that pump, because watch that kiddo. That's hilarious. I'm glad you're and I'm glad your pump didn't go down the chute. I would have had a panic attack if my pump went down the chute.
I think I have a backup, but that's another thing. I need a backup.
I mean, always be prepared, but also no one's prepared for their child sabotaging their diabetes. So.
And I obviously know he was too young to kind of understand that that he could really, really detrimentally hurt
in his head. He's probably this will just make mommy mad, but in real life, this could really affect mom if she, if God forbid you didn't have backup pens or you didn't have backup anything else.
Right.
Oh my God, when he's a teenager, it'll be a great story.
Yes. It's a great story, but that is something I will definitely want to sort of revisit when he's older and can comprehend. Just
your older kid must have been horrified.
He was horrified.
Yeah, because
he couldn't believe it.
I hear that. I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing that, because that kind of, in a dark way, made my night. But it kind of gets me, on a different question here, which is, what do you do when, you need to have those important conversations, or you need to have those, be there in the moment with your kids, but you're having a really bad high or really bad low? How do you explain that?
Yeah. So, I go, you know what it is. And this is just real life, but, I will address a low much more quickly than I do a high. And I think we all understand why,
Right.
that's kind of like an easy thing, but and I'm kind of like, I don't know if ashamed is the right word or whatever, but I will let a high kind of go if I'm in the middle of something and I don't have my pump and I don't know. So
Don't be ashamed of that. Things happen.
yeah.
We all have our own methods of dealing with
Yes.
things. There is no right and wrong. You're in charge of your own body. What works for you works for you. No need to
Right. Well,
apologize.
I do appreciate that. Sometimes we all need to hear that, right? But I will say I never struggled with it so severely again until this last year when with I think just the whole idea of this pandemic and being someone with an autoimmune disorder and having two kids who are now home with me and a demanding full-time job, I really let a lot of my health like responsibilities fall by the wayside. So I guess to answer your question, and unless it's something that is kind of immediate, um it doesn't always get so prioritized. But and for me, for my diabetes journey and experience in the last 19 years, I find that it sort of ebbs and flows with how much I'm really proactively taking care of myself and following up with doctors and trying to really be on top of using that bolus calculator. Like, how much easier can they make it for us? And I still just sometimes like,
It's still
shoot,
not easy
Yeah.
though. I mean,
Yeah.
you talk
Yeah.
about how you managed it without a CGM for so long and how it is kind. I mean, listen, it is a formula at the end of the day. Insulin needs are a formula to each individual person, but I personally, and it could be just my hormones, my IUD that I'm like, whatever it is, it's still hard for me to get 2 weeks out of the month for sure. I know what I'm doing, and like during the pandemic I found that I really, sorry dad if you're listening, but like my periods are just all over the place. I'm constantly stressed. Even if I feel chill, I know my body is still stressed. I can see it in my blood sugars. I can see it in everything. And I mean, like, pregnancy aside, because that's not where I'm at, but it's, I can't imagine having to deal with that while taking care of your kids who are watching you deal with that.
Yeah,
It sounds
it's
intense.
it's intense. It's definitely intense and it's challenging. It was so challenging, but I really had to kind of like recommit myself and sort of like double down on like my own commitment to my health and getting like, I have like a thyroid, I have oh my gosh,
Hashimoto's.
hypothyroidism. Not
Us?
full blown Hashimoto's, but like I could be on my way
We have
there.
Hashimoto's.
So there you go.
We're like,
The only
people
folks
talk
will
about
be
that.
bragging
Yeah.
about it.
That was something I had left kind of unchecked and realizing like, what am I doing? So like, so I, at the tail end of 2020, I really just sort of committed to, getting those appointments, getting that blood work done. And what helps for me is to also talk about it with my husband, because I'm so kind of programmed to like make it a non-issue, like, whatever, it's not a big deal, that sometimes just bringing it up, it kind of like reminds everybody like, oh yeah, okay, Bethany's dealing with this underlying kind of crazy disease that is manageable, but at times really not manageable. And so I think it helps to bring it up, and even bring it up in front of my kids and let everybody know that we are a family, we're in this together, but sometimes mom's operating on a completely different playing field. So I think just bringing awareness to it within my own little family has helped a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure. And you do bring up a good point.
Miriam,
I
go ahead.
didn't. No, I didn't think about it. The fact that this whole last year, like, I imagine your kids have been home, for at least a good chunk of it. So they're seeing you in your environment, managing your health probably more than they ever really have, and even little things like, I'm wondering, do they kind of understand the knowledge? Like, oh, mom's low. Let me grab her a juice box or juice or something. Like, they kind of get that, or is it not so much?
My older one kind of gets it, and because for some reason juice doesn't really work for me, it kind of like brings me up and then immediately down again. I need like So I need food.
You need the
So
fat, fiber, protein
yep,
component.
exactly. So I need to eat something when I'm really, really low. So he does understand that. And my husband really understands that too, So he will like just get me my food, or he'll see if he, and the Dexcom, it's on my phone, if it will beep really loudly and it won't stop beeping. And
That
so my
beep is
husband will,
insane. It
yeah,
has
so
woken the dead, I'm pretty sure. Like,
well, sometimes I think I'm so used to kind of just being like,
I
whatever,
sleep
I
through
feel
it.
fine.
My
Yeah, but
boyfriend's terrified.
yes,
He's
my
like,
husband will wake up and bring me juice, and he's like, "You need this, drink this," and I'm like, "Okay."
I can't even. So a few things here that I just like need to unpack are that my boyfriend, the way that you describe your diabetes to your children is literally how I describe diabetes to like people I've been dating. And I think that it's just this need for people to know. I mean, I think that says a lot about me and my ability to communicate with people, but like I need people to know it's serious, but that I'll be okay. Like I'm on top of it. And I think that comes from us, at least, Miriam's the licensed mental health counselor here, not me. But I feel like it comes from me being an adult and my parents not really being caregivers for my diabetes. Like they took great care of me growing up. I'm just talking about specifically diabetes because I was an adult. And you being 17, we've had to kind of be like, I got this, whether I want to or not, I got it. Don't worry, I'm fine. And I find myself downplaying diabetes a lot, but I also talk about it all the time. Literally have a podcast on it. So it's, it comes from a place of fear. And my biggest way to combat fear is information. And I think the more information we're able to share, whether it's to kids or to partners or to parents or nieces and nephews, I guess they're kids, so that was already talked about, but it's important. But I will say that as far as the electronics go, we've obviously come so far. I've only had diabetes. I'm going on my 8th year this year, I think. No, that can't be right. 7th. I'm not good at math. Don't ask me. But the Dexcom alarms on the phone will break through your silenced phone. I did find out the hard way last week that it won't break through if you have a sleep setting on your phone. So do not recommend doing that. But my boyfriend, the sheer, he's not necessarily afraid for me being low. The noise that wakes him up, the scream, it's not even a scream. It's like it's like I killed his firstborn or like accidentally suffocated him in his sleep. He flips out. And and like that scares the living crap out of me. So it's like this scenario where it's like I'm like, oh crap, my Dexcom's going on. In fact, I mean, honestly, the Dexcom doesn't get me out of bed all the time. His sheer terror does. He's an alarm in and of itself. But I imagine like, if he'd been exposed to those alarms from a younger age, it would be pretty scary, but it would also be a little more status quo. And it just kills me. I have to get it on tape. He'd kill me. He'd kill me if I posted anything about him freaking out about, it's really just he's in a deep sleep and this alarm's jarring. Like it has nothing to do with diabetes. But that gave me a good chuckle. That was my story.
So funny. And you said something just now that I wanted to touch on, because I think you mentioned, I'm not really remembering exactly what it was, but it made me think of the way that the fear, when you're talking about fear. And one of the ways I manage the fear of, the what ifs, like the down the line of all the kind of like long-term symptoms or side effects rather that can come with this disease is, and I manage it when I'm really proactive. Like I'm less stressed when I'm more, talking with my doctors on a more regular basis. I mean, I know that sounds kind of simple, but like how Emily, you were saying, we're used to kind of just like dealing with it on our own. And like, I know what's best for my body and I know how to manage this and that. I've been doing it for X number of years, but the truth is once in a while that fear does creep in. And especially now, as I'm a mother and realizing that, I have these little boys that are relying on me and they will, I want to be in their life for a long time. So just like being really, really proactive about my health in kind of like a very tangible way also helps to alleviate that emotional part of it, like the fear and the stress too. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. No, amen.
That's like a really good tidbit for sure.
Yeah. It's so true.
Well, thank you so much, Bethany. I'm going to wrap up unless you have any final questions, Miriam.
Final pressing thoughts? No, I think you did a good explanation, and this was like a really different perspective for us and for our audience of having one of us. You know, we've talked to parents of type 1 diabetics, of toddlers with type 1 diabetes, and how that experience is not having diabetes themselves. So I think you offer a very different perspective for us that we can relate to, because, you know, one day in the future, hopefully we'll be mothers as well. And so it's very exciting to hear from you, your perspective of, I've had this type 1 and I've had kids, and this is how I deal with it as a mother. And so thank you for sharing your perspective and
a full-blown career and just badass lady on top of it.
And you're an official Pancreas Pal now.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. And, you know, I want to be a resource for other people too. You know, and if you can reach me on social media, I'm pretty easy to find. And if people have questions about, you know, parenting with this disease or becoming pregnant or managing diabetes and pregnancy, I'm available. So I just wanted to put that out there too.
Yes, wonderful. Hit up Bethany. Her Instagram this is perfect. This is my favorite part, is wrapping it up. So you can reach her at Bethany Braun-Silva. We will spell that out for you. I will not spell it right now because I don't want to be put on the spot. You can reach her at her full name on Instagram. You can follow us at pancreas_pals, where we will be tagging Bethany in the upcoming episodes. So it's a really easy and quick way to go follow her. Check us out on Facebook at Pancreas Pals PP. You can slide into our DMs on both, either, whatever floats your boat. We love getting emails from you guys, and our email is pancreaspals123@gmail.com. Be sure to like, subscribe, whatever the kids say these days. And thank you so much, Bethany. You have been a joy, and I hope we have you on again soon. There's so much more we can talk about, but you know, for now, I'm pretty stoked to hear you can be a very happy, functioning type 1 with healthy, happy kids that hopefully don't steal your pump anymore.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much.
Yes, hopefully they learned their lesson on that one.
All right, guys.